Okay, let's hit go live, go live. Okay. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So we're going to continue, inshallah, Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th chapter, and we are now at the 109th verse, where Allah Ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, يَوْمَ يَجْمَعُ اللَّهُ الرُّسُلَ فَيَقُولُ مَاذَا أُجِبْتُمْ قَالُوا لَا عِلْمَ لَنَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ. So we're now at the verse where Allah Ta'ala is talking about the relationship between the Day of Judgment and the sending of messengers, and in which a key aspect of the Day of Judgment, of course, is the questioning. And so Allah Ta'ala says, for instance, consider on the day that He will gather all of the messengers together. So not only will Allah Ta'ala gather all of the all of the nations and all of the people, all of His creation, but He also in this particular verse highlights that He will gather together all of the messengers. And His question that He says to them, or that they will be put to the question, and so when they're questioned, wa alaikum salam, when they're questioned, they give a very, very important response. He says, what? قَالُوا لَا عِلْمَ لَنَا. The messengers, when they're questioned by Allah Ta'ala, their response is, we don't have any knowledge except, implying what? Except of what you have taught. Meaning we don't have any independent knowledge. إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ. You are the one that is always knowing what is in the unseen. What's interesting is that the response of the messengers, alayhim salam jami'an, is that it's similar to the malaika. It's similar to the angels when Allah Ta'ala, after He created Adam and He taught Adam, allamahu asma'a kullaha, He taught Adam the names of all things. And then those things were presented to the angels, in which Allah Ta'ala asked them, inform me about these. And they responded with the same response. Ma ilma lana. We don't have any knowledge, illa ma alamtana, other than what you have taught us. So this is an important, not only coinciding between how the messengers will answer the questioning by Allah Ta'ala, it also shows a level of deference, a level of respect, that when they're asked something in the presence of Allah, who am I to say anything? Right? Who am I to say anything? قَالُوا لَا عِلْمَ لَنَا. We don't have any independent knowledge. So likewise, there's an important lesson in this for us. When we are facing an issue or facing a topic, we should always pause and consider, what has Allah Ta'ala had to say about this? So continuing in التسهيل في علوم التنزيل, in the book of tafsir by the Andalusian scholar Ibn al-Juzay al-Kalbi rahimahullah, he says, what يوم يجمعكم الله الرسل, in the phrase or in the part of the verse where Allah Ta'ala talks about in the day that He will gather together all of the Rusul, He says, huwa yawm al-qiyamah. Of course, this is referring to, as we said, what, the Day of Judgment. He said, what, وَإِن تَصَبُ الظَّرْفِ بِفِعْلِ مضمر أي ماذا أجابكم به الأمم من إيمان وكفر وطاعة ومعصية. So the phrase it's in the accusative, mean that it's nasab. That's why it says intasaba. It's mansub, right? Meaning that it is it's put in the like the object, right? It's the object of the verb. Meaning, what did the nations respond to you? meaning, O messengers. So when we ask you, we're asking you about the nations that we sent you to. And so the implied meaning here is that, well, what was their response to Iman and Kufr, to belief and disbelief, and to obedience and disobedience? And so he says, وَالْمَقْصُودُ, right? So what the purpose of this questioning, الْمَقْصُودُ بِهَذَا السُّؤَالِ تَوْبِيخ مِنْ كُفْرٍ مِنَ الْأُمَمِ. So the purpose of this questioning is in a sense like a kind of rebuttal or rebuking those disbelieving nations and establishing a hujjah, a proof against them that what they have no excuse, ما في عذر, there's no excuse for them. So وإقامة الحجة عليهم انتصب ماذا أجبتم انتصاب مصدره. So the phrase, what did you answer, or how did you answer that questioning, is in the accusative case as to demonstrate that this is like a real thing happening. I mean, it's by it being the object of a verb. So he said, if the response were intended, it would be phrased, what did you answer with? Not what did you answer with, right, as if there's some kind of locution or some type of philosophy or whatnot, but, what was their response to you? So to help us understand what Ibn Juzay is talking about here, I have a little, for those following online, right, I have a little slide here. So in the passage, ماذا أجبتم, what did you answer, is described as being in the, again, being mansub, it's in the accusative as a nominalized expression. What do we mean here by this? So a nominalized expression turns a verb or verbal phrase into a noun phrase. So that way it goes from being the actor to the subject, meaning, so that's like what it's about. So it focuses on who are we talking about? So again, talking about the messenger. This can change how the phrase functions grammatically and how it is understood contextually. So one, emphasizing, by having the subject, now you're going to emphasize the actions of the subject. So if you say, Ishaq went to the store, even though Ishaq is the subject of the sentence, right, what is being emphasized in this sentence is the going to the store, right? So in that way, it emphasizes the act. So also, in this case, it's emphasizing the questioning. So this is all to make the Day of Judgment real, that it's not, the Day of Judgment just isn't this kind of, abstract concept, or, it's not that it's not, no, it's to emphasize the realness of it, and then by extraction, the realness of the consequences. Because Allah Ta'ala is asking the Rusul, He's asking the messengers, what is your response? Meaning that how did the people act? Were they compliant? Were they disobedient? And so on. So by using ماذا أجبتم in the accusative case as a nominalized expression, the emphasis is on the act of answering itself, meaning that also the Rusul, right, the Anbiya, the prophets and the messengers, they are, yes, we are still here. The prophets and the messengers, alayhim salam jami'an, they are going to answer truthfully. They are going to give an honest account of how the people responded to them. So it's an emphasis on the act of answering itself rather on the content of the answer. So this is also a testimony of the character of who the prophets and the messengers are. And that is, of course, one of sidq, one of truthfulness. It focuses on the fact that there was a response, meaning that the messengers were not neutral. They delivered the message. They told the people the truth, whether they like to hear it or not, rather than detailing what the specific response was. So again, this is an important part to highlight here at the end of this statement, is that the Qur'an, while on occasion will go into details here and there about certain things. Like a couple of weeks ago, we went through the verses that talked about inheritance. And several months ago, when we went through Surah An-Nisa, we went through the verses that talked about inheritance, about, this person gets a third and this person gets a fourth, right? So you will have occasions in the Qur'an that it will go into this kind of detail. But generally speaking, the Qur'an is a book that gives people, as one of my teachers said, it focuses more on the kulliyat versus the juz'iyat. It focuses more on the big picture than it does on minutiae of detail, especially when it comes to, either like some historical event, yarhamukallah, or even like certain details as it relates to the Day of Judgment or certain aspects about paradise. It will give us some descriptions, but it's not going to spend thousands of pages in minutiae, going through this kind of stuff. So that's an important aspect, just overall, of the style and the consistency of the Qur'an. And then also a nominalization abstracts the answer of answering into a concept. So this is also important, that who are the messengers of Allah, right? Even in that name, like Ar-Rusul, right? Rusul men, Rusulullah. They are the messengers of Allah. So by abstracting it, we don't need to know, well, what was the response of Jesus? What was the response of Sayyidina Isa? And what was the response of Ishaq? And what was the response of Dhul Kifl? And what was the response of Musa? No, we can abstract it because, as Allah Ta'ala says, لا نفرق بين أحد منهم. We don't make any distinction between them. Yes, they were sent to different nations. Some of them were given books, some of them weren't. But at the same time, they're all Rasulullah. They're all messengers of Allah. So this also helps to establish a consistency between them. So this section here is just to emphasize that one important quality of the Day of Judgment is going to be questioning. And even the messengers themselves will be questioned about the nations that they were sent to. So you can look in some more details about the slide, inshallah, that I'll put up for people to review. قالوا لا علم لنا. Now getting to this statement about, well, all of the messengers replied equally, what? We don't have any knowledge, meaning we don't have any independent knowledge other than what you gave us. إنما قالوا ذلك تأدبا مع الله فوكروا العلم إليه. So they said this out of respect for Allah. Why did the messengers, when they're asked, what is your response? How were the people? Even though they have an answer, because they were sent to the people, obviously know how the people responded. They know if they were obedient, disobedient, or whatnot. But when they are initially questioned by Allah, they give this answer out of respect on two ways. One, Allah Ta'ala never asks a question of which He does not already possess the answer. فَهُوَ الْعَلِيمُ الْخَبِيرُ. Right? Allah Ta'ala is already all-knowing. He is all-seeing. He is all-hearing. So He doesn't need to have the messengers inform Him on something that He might be deficient in knowledge-wise. So the messengers know this, and so there is a certain kind of, I don't want to use the word theatrics, but there's a certain kind of etiquette. Allah Ta'ala is questioning, right? So that's why it says ta'adduban, right? It's out of adab. It's a way of, like when you have adab, what does this mean to have adab? So Ibn Juzay mentions, وَذَلِكَ تَأَدُّبًا مَعَ اللَّهِ. That is out of respect to Allah. So when you, let's say like with your grandmother, your grandfather, the way that you speak to them, I mean, they're flesh and blood, they're a human being like anybody else, but when you speak to them, there's a level of deference that you do with them that you might not do like with your sibling, right? Who maybe you just, punch in the face or something, right? You have a different level of respect for them that you would. Why? This is the meaning of ta'addub. It's always done this way, not because they're necessarily, I'm not comparing your grandparents to Allah Ta'ala, but what I'm saying is that there's a kind of ritual that you do with them, that you instinctively know to have respect for. So the messengers, awwalan, first off, when they respond to Allah and they're given a question, well, who am I to answer any question when I'm being questioned by the one who knows everything? So it is, it's out of their ma'rifatullah, it's out of their knowledge of who Allah Ta'ala is. So this is also for us as a point of reflection. When people say, is this or that haram? Or what does Islam say about this or that? And instinctively we will say, well, it's A, B, and C, or it's X, Y, and Z. Not that we can't answer the question, because obviously the one that's asking this question is not Allah Ta'ala, it's another human being. But we are nonetheless talking about Islam, which is from it is from Allah, it's His religion, and it's revealed by Him. To have a moment of, okay, let me step back here and really think, do I have knowledge on this topic or do I not? And then also, most importantly, do I have respect for it? This also reminds me of how it was described that Imam Malik, rahimahullah, when he would teach the statements of the Prophet ﷺ, when he would teach a hadith, not Qur'an, but just simply statements of the Prophet ﷺ, that he would make a full ghusl, a ritual washing, and he would tatayyab. He would put on like atar, he would put on some nice, something nice scents, and he would wear nice clothes. Out of what? Out of ihtiram and Nabi alayhi sallam, out of respect for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when people would ask him questions, he was known to say la adri more than he would say adri. He was known to say quite often, I don't know. And he was never afraid to say that I don't know. So again, it just really reveals the humility and the adab and the character of the Prophet of the Prophets alayhim salam ajma'in when they are in the presence of Allah and they're being asked about Him. فَوَكَلُوا الْعِلْمَ عَلَيْهِ. Right, and so they entrust that. They also, it shows a level of almost like tawakkul. They trust that Allah Ta'ala knows. But nonetheless, there's like when you go to court, there's a kind of proceeding, when you come in, all rise, the judge walks in, you sit down, and then there's this like procedure that goes on. And in some ways, this is similar because on the day of judgment, right, there will be a kind of court that is held of which Allah Ta'ala will preside over. People's books will be brought out and it will be either for or against them. Even the messengers will be questioned. And so there's a kind of also formality and a procedure that's going on here. So the messengers will be questioned, not because Allah Ta'ala doesn't know what He sent them to do and what was the result of their sending, but there is a formality. There is a procedure on the Day of Judgment. And this is also important for us to remember that on that day, it is a day completely like any other day. And so likewise, we should prepare for it because it is a day unlike any other day. And there will be a formality, there will be questioning. And it's kind of like when you go to a court, you can't just get up and start talking because in a human court, they will consider you in contempt of court or out of order or these kinds of things. Of course, as Allah Ta'ala says in Surah An-Naba, right, in the 78th chapter, that nobody will be able to even speak on the Day of Judgment. إِلَّا أَذْنَهُ الرَّحْمَنِ, except for the most merciful allows them to speak. So on the Day of Judgment, there will be procedure. People will be questioned. And if Allah Ta'ala allows them to respond, they can respond. But they will have no volition on their own to say anything. And their book will be read to them. And some people will be admitted to pass to the garden and other people will be flung into the fire. Like the bailiff taking somebody out and throwing them in jail. Except in this case, there will be no struggling, there will be no fighting, there will be people wailing. But, so again, this is all to show us a kind of like procedure. قال Ibn Abbas. Now, Ibn Abbas interpreted this verse to mean what al-ma'na la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana, going back to highlight the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah. So Ibn Abbas interpreted to mean the same as what we have no knowledge except what you have taught us. Again, going back to the verse that is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. وَقِيلَ مَعْنَاهُ علم الساقط في جنب علمك ويقوي ذلك قوله إنك أنت علام الغيوب. And then another interpretation, and again, when the ulama say qila, they're mentioning this for some reason. That reason could be it is an acceptable but weaker opinion, or perhaps it's a popular opinion that is making the rounds, so to speak, but it is an incorrect one, and the scholar wants to point it out, of which then maybe he will critique. So again, whenever you see qila versus qala, right, it is said or it was said versus he said it, right, especially the passive voice, this always denotes, it's like a note, but there's something going on here that usually is going to be usually in the form of a criticism. So he says another interpretation, parentheses, maybe not the best or a weaker interpretation, is that their knowledge is insignificant compared to Allah's knowledge, which is supported by the statement, إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ. So again, he's putting this here as like a secondary to help explain, but by him saying قَالَ Ibn Abbas said, that is stating kind of like the baseline, and then the second one here is just to kind of support that. لأن من علم الخفيات لم تخاف عليهم الظواهر. So this indicates that the one who knows the hidden matters is certainly aware of the apparent ones. Again, why are they saying why is their response when they're questioned by Allah Ta'ala, what happened? What is your response? لا علم لنا, إنك أنت العلام الغيوب. Oh, we don't have any knowledge. You're the knower of everything. You're the knower of the unseen. Because they understand if Allah Ta'ala is the one that knows all of the things that are khafiyyat, all the things that are hidden, then of course He knows the things, as He said, عليه الظواهر. They know that Allah Ta'ala knows everything that's apparent. وقيل ظهروا عن الجواب لحول ذلك اليوم. Again, another interpretation is that they were overwhelmed and forgot the answer due to the terror of that day. So again, as I said, when you see qila, this is a sign that either it's a supplementary thing to the stronger opinion, or he's letting you know that there are some people that are saying this, and this is a saying that is making the rounds, but it's not strong. And so, as he says, وَهَذَا بَعِيد. وَهَذَا بَعِيد. This idea that the messengers forgot, they were so overwhelmed out of fear of Allah, which is no doubt everybody will be in fear of Allah on the Day of Judgment, but they were so overwhelmed with fear that they forgot to answer due to the terror of that day. He said, nah, this is far off. So even though this is an explanation making the rounds, Ibn Juz says, nah, that's not really something that can be substantiated. لأن الأنبياء في ذلك اليوم آمنوا. Right? He said that is extremely unlikely, because the prophets on that day, they will be secure. Amanun is the verb that he used. He said, it is unlikely that they will be so fearful of Allah that they would not be able to answer his question. Two reasons. Number one, when the prophets are given a command by Allah, they fulfill the command because they are supported by Him to do so. And they are neither weak or disobedient to Him. So that doesn't really jive. And then two, they are the ones that Allah Ta'ala will admit to paradise for fulfilling their mission. And so their iman will make them amanun. Right? Their high faith, their high iman in Allah will inshallah make them people who are secure on that day. وَقِيلَ أَرَادُوا بِذَلِكَ تَوْبِيخ الْكُفَّارِ. It is also said that their intention was to reproach the disbelievers But at the same time, he said, ذَلِكَ هَذَا وَبَعِيد. This is kind of far off. The stronger opinion is that, again, they are alluding to what Allah Ta'ala has also said in Surah Al-Baqarah, that they don't have any knowledge, in parentheses, other than what you have taught us. إِذْ قَالَ اللَّهُ يَا عِيسَى ابن Maryam. And then now Allah Ta'ala will talk about the son of Mary. He's going to talk about Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, and he's going to talk about now on that day, because it's also about talking about questioning the messengers. And let me just put this here for the folks online. I forgot to copy and paste, so just in case for those who are online that can see. Right, so on the day of judgment, Allah will say to Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus, the son of Mary, right, remember my favor upon you and your mother. So now also, again, we're getting some very important details about another important aspect of the day of judgment. And we said, what? There's going to be questioning. But there's also going to be some answering. So as one of my teachers had said, he said, Yawm al-Qiyamah, right? It is what? Mafruq fi juz'aini as-su'al wa jawab. The day of judgment is going to be split into two parts. And of course, he's paraphrasing here. He's giving us an idea. He said that it's split into two parts. One will be su'al, will be questioning. The other will be jawab, it will be answering. So another important aspect of the day of judgment is to ultimately establish the truth by answering and refuting all ideas of kufr. One of them that is persisted is what? This idea of Allah Ta'ala having a son. And that his mother, may Allah Ta'ala bless her, is, wa na'udhu billah, the mother of God. Which is an absolutely insane statement. So part of the day of judgment, Allah Ta'ala says what? إِنْ أُذْكُرْ نِعْمَتِي عَلَيْكَ وَعَلَىٰ وَلِدِكَ. Remember the favor that I had bestowed upon you and your mother. That in itself is rad ala al-fikra annahu ibn Allah. That in itself is a kind of refutation that Sayyidina Isa is the son of God. He said, remember that and how I وَأَيَّدْتُكَ بِالرُّوحِ الْقُدُسِ, right? And that I supported you. If you are the son of God, or وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ, you are God, you are Allah Ta'ala in the flesh, you would need no support. If you really were Allah Ta'ala, who can support Allah? None supports Allah, Allah supports all others. So again, an important aspect of the Day of Judgment is establishing ultimate truths, where truth will triumph over falsehood in a finality, and it will set the record straight that Allah Ta'ala never had a son because he did not want to, not out of impossibility, as Allah Ta'ala said in the Qur'an, if I had wanted to, I could have had any number of sons, but I did not. It was subhana, and he is above this. And so Allah Ta'ala has said decisively, I have no children, and that the mother of Sayyidina Isa miraculously gave birth to him, but she is not the mother of Allah, wa na'udhu billah, and that they were both supported. Allah Ta'ala supported Maryam in giving the birth of Sayyidina Isa, and Allah Ta'ala supported Sayyidina Isa through his risala and his preaching and the miracles and so on and so forth. Right? تَقَلِبُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ, like him speaking in the cradle, وَكِهْلًا, right? As well as an adult. وَعَلَّمْتُكَ الْكِتَابِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ وَالتَّوْرَةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ. And that also remember that I taught you the gospel, the Torah and the gospel. How could Sayyidina Isa be Allah Ta'ala if he had to learn something? So again, the Day of Judgment, su'al and jawab, questioning, answering, and setting the record straight. وَإِذْ تَخْلُقُ مِنَ الطِّينِ كَهَيَةِ الطَّيْرِ بِإِذْنِهِ. Right, and remember how you were able to take a piece of clay and mold it in the shape of a bird, and then by my permission, breathe into it, right? So it became alive. This is again from the miracle. So going through and repeating, right? And how you healed the blind and the sick and so on and so on, and how you brought the dead to the life. By what? Every time, what? Bi'idhni, by my permission. So everything here laid out to establish what is the final record. وإذ تخرج الموتى بإذنه وإذ كففتم بني إسرائيل عنك إذ جئتهم, and that how I prevented Bani Israel, right, the children of Israel, from harming you when they tried to kill you, even though you came to them with clear proofs of what their religion was. So again, establishing that Sayyidina Isa was also not crucified. So I know a lot of times when Muslims get into these apologetics or arguments with certain Christians online about whether Sayyidina Isa was crucified or not, and you get these, I forget who the guy is. He's like I think he's like Persian background, Iranian background, but he's a professor of like English lit at, what is it, UC Santa Barbara? He had the TV show. What's his name? Yeah, he's the guy that had the TV show, and I forget his name. But anyway, so he wrote this book about the historical Jesus and said, oh yeah, without a doubt, the Muslim take on Jesus is wrong. This is supposedly as a Muslim, that Jesus was definitely crucified. Reza Aslan, thank you. Yeah. Oh, is he now? I know. I thought at one time he was at UC Santa Barbara. Maybe he's UC. So he wrote, and I remember that. Well, not just that he's a clown, but this is a statement of blatant kufr, and holding this belief makes one a kafir. And I remember that when this book came out, and there was an interview of him, you can find it on YouTube, but which he clearly stated, and he's never made any recanting of the statement that yes, the Qur'an is wrong, Jesus was crucified. I was like, this person is a kafir. Like, and I don't say that lightly. I have no desire to go around of make takfir on anybody, but this person is a kafir if you say the Qur'an is wrong. So my point being is most of the time people will point to the verses where Allah Ta'ala definitely says, and they without a doubt did not crucify him. But also this passage here towards the end of Surah Al-Ma'idah is also an important one that establishes that the Qur'an has the correct narrative on who Jesus, the son of Mary, and his mother Mary, indeed who they really were. And that an important aspect then of the Day of Judgment will be to rubber stamp, finalize the story and the facts and the truth about who they were. So this is all part of the questioning and an important aspect of the Day of Judgment. So, إِذْ قَالَ اللَّهُ, now as in the passage, right, and when Allah said, He said it's possible that the إِذْ, or when, is a substitute for or related to يَوْمَ يَجْمَعَهُمْ, right, the day that He will gather them all together. And this statement could occur on the Day of Judgment, or the action implied by إِذْ could also be understood that it has already happened. And this is consistent in the Qur'an. So for instance, you take إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, right? You take some of those suwar in Juz' Amma, in the last part of the Qur'an, that begin and when the sun winds up, and when these things happen. It's talking about things that are, on one hand, by putting it idha or id with a past tense verb, it sounds like it's technically past tense, but it infers it's something in the future, but with the idea that without a doubt it's as if it's happened. It hasn't happened yet, but there's no doubt whatsoever that that event will take place. So he's just going in to show that likewise the Qur'an maintains a level of consistency grammatically and stylistically, right, throughout the Qur'an. So this implies that the statement could have been made either in this world or on the Day of Judgment, or that essentially it's almost as if it's already happened. As where Allah Ta'ala says, وَأَنْتَ مَيْتٌ وَهُمُ الْمَيِّتُونَ. Like, it's as if you're dead and they're already dead, even though he said this to the Prophet ﷺ while he was still alive. So the Qur'an is a book that also is not locked in sort of in a temporal way, that it speaks with a level of finality about events that have not happened. This is why Allah Ta'ala will say, for instance, about وَالسَّاعَةُ آتِيَةٌ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا. Right, the hour is coming, there's no doubt about it. Or يَوْمَ يَجْمَعَكُمْ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. And the day he will gather you all together on the Day of Judgment, and there's no doubt about it, though it has not happened. So stylistically, this is to emphasize that, because for one, Allah Ta'ala says, إِنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ. The promise of Allah is true. So if the promises of Allah is true, وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, and Allah has power and measure over all things, then it doesn't need to actually happen and for it to be true, because for it to happen is merely an inevitability. إِذَا وَاقِعَةُ الْوَاقِعَةِ. Right? When the calamity happens, it's an inevitability. Inna wa'ad Allahi haq. Right? When Allah Ta'ala says to the Prophet ﷺ, tell them that what? The promise of Allah is true. لِتُجَزَ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ. Right? وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. So that on that day, every soul will be repaid for what it did, and they will not be wronged, though maybe not harmed, they will not be wronged in their repayment. If the repayment is for good, they will be repaid for good. If the repayment is for bad, then they will be repaid for bad. Right, so this is a consistency throughout the Qur'an that allows us, right? So at the end of all of this, like, what does this mean? It's for us to have yaqeen. It's for us to have certainty about the Day of Judgment, that it is a true, real thing, that even if it has not happened, and even if I have not passed away from this life yet, know that it is coming. The hour is coming. We will all be gathered together, and my book will be read, and my life will be judged, and I can have a level of assurance of this greater than وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, greater than the sun and its brilliance, greater than the reliance of the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. So all of this is to drive home a sense of what? I need to have khawf and khashya and rahba. I need to have a sense of fear and reverence, and therefore get ready. Prepare for this day. Like when the man asked the Prophet about the hour, what did you do to prepare for it? So this is what Ibn Juzay here is drawing our attention to. And so he said that you will also find وقد تقدم تفسير ألفاظ هذه الآية في آل عمران. So he said, for instance, you will also find a similar explanation has also been provided in Surah Al Imran. That meaning what? The Quran is consistent and it repeats itself and sometimes varies, but to keep driving home the facts and the truth. وَكَذَلِكَ الضَّمِيرُ فِي تَكُونُ. And likewise the pronoun in it becomes وَكَذَلِكَ الضَّمِيرُ الْمَذْكُورُ فِي قَوْلِهِ فِي آلِ عِمْرَانَ, as well as, right, mentioning the pronoun in Surah Al Imran in the فَيُنْفَخُ فِيهِ, and he breathes life into it, meaning the clay and the bird. He says, "A'id ala al-kaf." It is in relation to the kaf, meaning to be method, right? To be like a thing. He says, "Ala al-kaf aidan لأنها بمعنى مثلي وإن شئت قلت هو في موضعين عائد على الموصوف المحذوف." So he said, it is, if you wished, you could say in both instances, it returns to the the omitted subject, right? That was described by Allah Ta'ala, and its feminine form is estimated to mean here an image or a likeness of it, and the masculine form means like a person or being. And so he's just going into, again, that Allah Ta'ala has talked in other verses of the Qur'an about Sayyidina, about the birds being brought back to life and some of the miracles of Sayyidina Isa. And so that takes us up to verse 110. Any questions about anything that was covered? So again, I'll leave the PDF for those who want to check this out later, that go a little bit more into some of the details. I think that will be helpful to understand about, like, why is it important for a thing to be in the accusative sense, or move from the accusative to the nominative, like all those kinds of things. I don't want to bog down, but I do have the PDF, and then we'll put it up, and we'll link to it from the YouTube page if anybody wants to go into more details. So we'll take like a quick, maybe like 5-10 minute break. Oh yes, sure.
So the idea when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is revealing and questioning, even though He knows, is it correct to understand it in a way of not just setting the record, but because of His adl, He's allowing people to understand the truth of what may have transpired, such as Isa alayhi salam or whatnot. So everything is not only rectified in people's understanding, and this is why you're going to the hellfire, or this is why you're going to Jannah, or this is what. So everything is rectified of its adl, because it could just put you in the fire, and you don't even need to be questioned. You don't need to know.
Right.
You just, that's it. So this also.
But it's also, yeah, it's also an aspect of adala. So it's a point that Dawood made that's good, is that, so one of the other things you could also understand from out of this is that Allah Ta'ala is just. And so whether it is in, He's merciful to people, which is also a form of just, He's merciful to people, or rewarding people or recompensing them if some wrong was done to them. But as for those who disobeyed Him, right, that when we put somebody into the fire, both for that person being put into the fire, and then also for us knowing, well, why does Allah punish people? To establish like a baseline of justice, so that you're put into it based upon the truth. And therefore on that day, the truth will be established, because not mentioned in this particular ayah, but on the day of judgment, Jesus and His mother will actually rebuke the Christians, will refute any claim that they had to His divinity or to her divinity that she gave birth to, Rabbul Alameen wa na'udhu billah, right? They themselves on the day will refute people. So like I said, it is very much like a kind of court procedure. Allah Ta'ala, if He wants to do, He could just throw somebody in the fire, and that's it. You know, or as Allah Ta'ala says, He can admit somebody to paradise بِغَيْرِ حِسَاب. He can admit somebody to paradise without any procedure whatsoever, without any reckoning, if He so desires. But on the day of judgment is described, well, there's going to be a procedure. The angels will come, Allah Ta'ala will come on His throne, He will be upon the throne in a way that befits Him, and then He will be brought, the sun will be brought close, everybody will be gathered together, and it's going to go one by one by one. Like you'll have the nations, وَتَرَى كُلَّ أُمَّةٍ جَاثِيَةٍ, all of the nations will come, but then also shakhsan bi shakhs, one person at a time will come, and this is why the day of judgment will take a very long time. Even such that the animals, right, there's interesting statements of the Prophet ﷺ, of the ram it will have its day in court, so to speak, with another ram. And they will have it out. The animals will even have their day in court, of which whatever wrongs that were done to them, that they will have. So it is about, you cannot have true justice without having procedure. Right? It's not vigilantism. So it's not Allah Ta'ala shows up, everybody just gets just gets thrown into the fire like a vigilante and there's no procedure. No, there is a procedure. And you will know why you're in the fire. Just as much you will know why you're in paradise. Everybody, that's why one of my teachers said, he said, على اليوم القيامة لا هناك كفار. He said, on the day of judgment, there won't be any kuffar. He said, yes, there will be people that will be judged as kuffar. But there will be nobody on the day of judgment that has any mafi raib. Nobody will have any doubts. That's why they'll say, send us back. We believe now. We all believe. Right? The issue is, do you show up on the day of judgment as a believer, or do you show up as a disbeliever, as a kafir? But then when you see all the truth, I believe now. And so for this reason, there is all of this procedure. Justice is established. That's why Allah says, what? وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Nobody will be wronged on the day of judgment. There will be no dhulm. وَمَا هُوَ ظَلَّامٌ لِلْعِبَادِ. Allah does not wrong His ibad. Doesn't mean He doesn't punish them, but He does not wrong them in any way. So there is an establishment of adala, of also justice. And so everybody will know. Everybody on that day will know what, and they will agree to it. I mean, I think that is maybe you could say one of the really stunning aspects of Allah's power is that the people on the day of judgment that will show up, and they know, they will know what they did wrong, what they did for right and wrong, and so on. That Allah Ta'ala will say to them, right, رَبُّ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا الرَّحْمَنِ لَا يَمْلِكُونَ مِنْهُمْ خِطَامًا. Allah Ta'ala is the Lord of the heavens and the earth and everything in between them. He is the most merciful. None will be allowed to speak except by His permission. Right? None except will be allowed to speak. And therefore, what He said, يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الرُّوحُ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ صَفًّا. The angels will come, as well as ar-ruh, right? Jibreel and all of the other angels will come rank upon rank. لَا يَتَكَلَّمُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَذِنَ لَهُ الرَّحْمَنِ. None will be allowed to speak except by the permission of the most merciful. وَقَالَ صَوَابًا. And they will say what? And their words will be spoken as true. And then some say what? They will agree, yes, this is true. Even the kuffar. They will admit, what? ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. We wronged ourselves. Yes.
It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing when, like, you put it in this terms about the procedure, right? The necessity for procedure, and Allah has the right to do with His creation whatever He wants to do with His creation, right? There doesn't need to be procedure. He'll still be just, right? We can be flung into the fire and it will be just, right? But at the same time, Allah is compassionate, Allah is merciful, right? And when He does give, inshallah, He does give some of us permission to speak. Part of that permission will not only be we've wronged ourselves, it'll also be an opportunity to make claim for wrongs that others have done to you, right? And there'll be compensation for that, right? So that part right there, like you mentioned, this all happens according to procedure, right? So even in regards to giving you the opportunity to not necessarily defend yourself, right? Because it is going to be some who say, well, they led us in this direction and that's not going to be accepted, right? But there are going to be some who lay claims, like you and I, are going to probably make claims against each other, right? In the event that our rights were violated, right? Or our rights were neglected. And Allah will compensate us for that, right? And so without that procedure, that action of demonstrating mercy, demonstrating compassion, demonstrating justice, that opportunity's not there. You go where you go, and ain't no conversation about it, right? So I think it's just pretty amazing that you mentioned the necessity for procedure, and even for you to make that claim, right? Think of it in legal terminology, right? In order for you to make that claim, right, there has to be some precedent, some procedure that's followed, right?
I mean, we tend to translate in the English one of Allah's names, Al-Hakim, as the wise. But this is not really what I would say in the spirit of the root of the word, which is hakam. Hakama means to judge, to preside over. So Al-Hakim is the one that is wise because Allah Ta'ala makes proclamations, of course, based upon his knowledge, and they were always good, but they're always firm. So if we understand that on that day we will be brought before the one who is Al-Aziz Al-Hakim, because Allah Ta'ala often repeats these two names of his together in the Qur'an. وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. Matter of fact, when we recited this morning in Fajr, Surah Al-Jathiyah, and at the end of that, وَلَهُ الْكِبْرِيَاءُ فِي السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Allah Ta'ala has complete dominion over the heavens and the earth. وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. And he is what? He is the all-powerful, and he is not just simply the all-wise, but he is the one that is in control and presides over it. And as we said, that chapter deals a lot with the Day of Judgment, because the Jathiyah is what Jathiyat al-Umam, right, is the kneeling of the nations. وَتَرَى كُلَّ أُمَّةٍ جَاثِيَةٍ. You'll see every nation kneeling. So it is an important aspect for us to understand that Allah Ta'ala is going to hold court, so to speak. The people who have not been sinless, but those that followed the correct procedure of how to live. They submitted to him, they associated no partner with him, they followed the messenger that was sent to them. In the case of us, we followed the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that we tried to do righteous deeds, and we asked Allah for forgiveness for what we did wrong, so that He will yukaffir anhum sayyatihim, that Allah Ta'ala would then, hopefully overlook or reject of what we did. As Allah Ta'ala says, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, those that believed and did good deeds, فَيُدْخِلُهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ فِي رَحْمَتِهِ, they will be entered into Allah's mercy. That is also procedure. That is also Allah presiding over us and deeming that it's like, as we say, even in a human court, you did something wrong, you messed up, you committed a crime, but you have nedam. What do? You throw yourself on the mercy of the court. And sometimes, you can make a deal, you get a plea deal, or you get your sentence reduced or commuted or something like that. So even in a human court, we have echoes of these kinds of ideas. But on that day, right, Allah Ta'ala will be the only one that will be لَا يَتَكَلَّمُونَ, right, إِلَّا الرَّحْمَنِ. None will be able to speak except for the most merciful, except that He allows it. So it's a good reminder for us to what? Cultivate, and inshallah, an unshakable sense of this day that is encroaching upon us minute by minute, day by day, right, of which we have to prepare for, inshallah. So that inshallah, the takeaway, right, what is all of this about? Cultivating that sensibility, inshallah. So we'll take maybe like a quick 5-minute break here, and then we'll come right back for our fiqh class. وصلوات الله تعالى على النبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.